Thank you everyone for joining us at the ABFM virtual workshop on the path to successful collaboration. Rather than my doing an introduction or my take on an introduction for the panelists, I would like to invite the panelists to introduce themselves and provide some background or examples of their collaborative approaches. So we will start with Thad.
My name is Thad Calabrese. As we said, I am an associate professor at New York University at the Robert F. Wagner Graduate School of Public Service. I currently lead the finance specialization and teach all sorts of courses in financial management, which at our school covers government, nonprofit, healthcare organizations, and even some for-profit, because a fair number of our students go into for-profit work, such as, banking and bond ratings. It's just a couple examples. We asked that we mention some examples of collaboration or how we have collaborated. When I first started out, I did most of my work on my own. So if you look at my CV, my early research and grant reports, that's all just me. And then I eventually started to collaborate with people, and since then I've become a serial collaborator. And I have long-term collaborations. I've worked with several of our ABFM colleagues. And I've also worked with practitioners on grants and reports. And I have also worked with students on, as research assistants, but also as collaborators and as co-authors. Students mostly meaning PhD students, but I've worked with master's students as well. And I can give you more details as we go through the next hour.
And we'll go to Aimee next.
All right, thank you. It's so nice to see our ABFM friends, and also to meet a couple new ABFM friends. So that's great. One of the benefits of organizing these sessions. I'm in a Department of Political Science, and I'm also in Oklahoma. So everybody in Oklahoma gets to take American federal government. Now, the smart ones, of course, they test out of it or AP out of it or something, but we do about 8,000 seats a year in our department. And what that means is I've never had a graduate research assistant in my time at OU, because they're all graduate teaching assistants. And Ani has had the benefit of doing that, and knows the challenges that you have connecting with research, connecting with faculty members in their research, because you're so busy doing your own sections of 1113 and grading 1113. So, but I have had a couple students that have volunteered. They've been interested in doing research, and so they've come and volunteered. But most of the time I get my research partners from an undergraduate Carl Albert Congressional Studies Center fellows, which is also quite interesting, because I don't study Congress or elections or politicians, thank God, but they're willing to let me work with students and talk about government money. So that has worked out very well. I think if you've been to ABFM, you might have met some of my undergraduate research fellows. I also have had a couple MPA students who I've been able to include some small funding on a federal grant that I didn't get any money from, but I was able to get some money from them, from some of my friends. And then I've also done a lot of research partnerships with students from my colleagues. Like, I just got off of a dissertation defense with Wei J. Liao at UNO, but we're doing with Carol Ebden, we're doing some research with him. Or I do some students, they get really excited in class. I have 3 of them last summer that got really excited, and they just presented at MPSA last week. And so I kind of get involved with their topics, which aren't necessarily my topic. And so right now, in fact, it's been a strange circumstance. A high school student here, I don't know how she found my name, because she lives 2.5 hours away in a very small town. But I just got a research project set up with her that's going to have to do with my role on the nonprofit Autism Foundation of Oklahoma talking about corporal punishment in schools because they've decided that that would be a good idea for people on the spectrum, for their parents to let them be beat at school. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of weird. I want to know more. So I like these kind of ripped from the headlines projects where I can get involved with students and eventually they'll end up in one of my classes or they may move on to a dissertation. So, and I have had, if you know me, you know, I've had two longtime collaborators. One of them is Carol Ebden at UNO. And then the other one was someone that was at my department, Jos Rodskelders, and we work extensively on the governance aspect rather than on the money aspect. And with that, I will share more later.
Lots more to share. Tima.
Good afternoon. My name is Temirlan Moldogazi. I'm trying to de-Russify my name for obvious historical reasons. And so I am an associate professor at the School of Public Policy, a new school at the Pennsylvania State University. These days, I'm mostly an administrator. I'm the director of graduate studies. And so collaboration is the only thing that is saving my research, I would say, these days. I'd like to take, I guess, the discussion into, I guess, three groups of people that I collaborate or collaborated with in the past. One is the students as the PhD or master's students. And the way I approach this, which was, I guess, passed on by the previous generation of scholars in our field, was more like a mentorship and socialization function of students into either ABFM or other associations that I'm a member of. So I really approach that as a teaching or service even to my field to help the new folks to join what we were saying, our brotherhood and sisterhood of public finance scholars earlier. And so that is, I think, one group. And in a lot of programs, I think, around the country, public policy or public administration or, public affairs in general, there are very few PhD level classes that sort of take much work into that socialization aspect, I suppose. Some programs are bigger and can do it, but a lot of programs don't have that luxury. The other group of collaborators are the practitioners, and I like this group because they actually know the inner workings of public organizations and their own interactions with key stakeholders. And so something that I've been doing over the last couple of years was working with people that are actually running the finances of countries. And then, believe it or not, a lot of things are very sobering. The assumptions and theories that I come in with, they quickly remind me how, I guess human organizations may bypass some of the things that we assume exist in sort of our daily lives. Again, I think practitioners keep my research real and actually relevant to the most sort of important aspects within public organizations. And I keep saying public organizations. I suppose I need to sort of add that I'm a public administration scholar with a very heavy tint on public finance. I suppose that's my training. And the final group is obviously research colleagues. A lot of them are at ABFM. A lot of them are also in other associations where I go to, urban studies, maybe international finance these days. But this group is more about, in my view, about complementarities in training, maybe sharing data sets, and perhaps even resources. So on that note, I'm going to stop here and let Wie to take us into the next questions.
But to quickly recap, we've seen kind of across our panelists lots of different examples of collaborations, not just what we might as faculty members typically think about collaborating with graduate students, undergraduate students, and even high school students, collaborating with faculty colleagues within the same institution or in other institutions, and also in Tima's example, I'd love to hear more about this a little bit later, collaborating with practitioners as well. So lots of good ideas for collaboration. But this workshop is targeted at doctoral students and junior faculty. So can you share with our audience the benefits of collaboration and how kind of this collaborative approach has helped you? And since Tima wrapped up that question, he gets to kick us off with this one.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll begin with the sort of the back end of your question, impact on me personally, I suppose, of these collaborations. I'd say this was and is an opportunity to learn from peers and lean on their experience in whatever the questions are that we're learning. And unlike Thad, I have always been a social person, and so I've been talking to individuals right away from my PhD program, and I learn a lot from my peers. And then so I think it helped initially, since again I'm an international. Although I've been in the US for some time now, initially just learning about the US system, state and local governments, broadly defined, sort of collaborations helped me to get in touch with sort of the important themes and terms in public finance. The other aspect that I think is beneficial is that my collaborators help me keep the deadlines, and I tend to miss my own deadlines. But if I promise something to someone else, there's a higher likelihood that I will keep those deadlines. The collaborations also help with dealing with the lengthy peer review process, and so unfortunately, from the beginning that you start a research project, until it gets published, it's usually a couple of years, and then this process can be grueling, maybe discouraging. Some of the reviews can be sort of harsh and maybe even hurt our feelings. It's good to commiserate with someone else, during that process, sort of, someone to talk to and understand what the actual suggestions are to improve the work. The other thing, since I'm Central Asian, I suppose, between the empires of the past and today, divide and conquer is something that is, that I would use, between different people. You can actually get a lot done by dividing and conquering certain tasks. Now, to summarize, I suppose in early years, collaborations for me were more of a learning the ropes of working through the peer review process. So I was more of a student and junior colleague rather than the senior one. Later years, and especially with I guess age keeping increasing from year to year, it's really about thinking about research that has impact both in theory and practice. And then sort of the luxury, of course, is at some point we all get tenured. And so that publish or perish risk becomes sort of a minimal concern. And then at that point, unless you're settled with admin duties, you get to do the research that you actually like. And that's where I think I'm really enjoying my sort of recent several years. So overall, I suppose the greatest benefit of collaborations is that other people get to polish my work while I'm helpful sometimes to their work.
I think helpful is the key word there, Tima. Thad, you're next.
I think Tima did a great job articulating some of the realities of being a doctoral student or being a junior faculty member. There is, the incentive to collaborate is that you can potentially be on more publications. That being said, you should not think that joining a paper means that you only have to do half the paper. So even though you can get more of those publications, it really, as your projects multiply, you will be exponentially busier and busier. But the reality is, I certainly want to second what Tima and Aimee said, that part of collaboration the benefits of it is certainly, camaraderie and especially helping. I think the way Tima put it was perfect, that it should be viewed as a form of service by senior level faculty for doctoral students and for junior faculty, to help mentor them, not just in research, but in, the norms of the membership associations, of what to do at conferences. It's not just about presenting research, it's about interacting with other people. I think all of that is spot on. But at the end of the day, when you go up for tenure, not the whole thing, but a big chunk of that is going to be about your publication record, the quality, the quantity, et cetera. And so having collaborators that can help you, get more publications to increase the quality of your work, to increase the impact of your work. I think all of those are, the goal of collaboration, and when it works, that is exactly, what it does. And it's different when you're younger. So since this is targeted more towards, I don't mean younger age-wise, more younger career-wise. The two are not always overlapping, but frequently are. I think that is the big help with collaboration. That if you're working with people, you can flesh out ideas. You can flesh out the good ones and the bad ones, so that you don't waste your time on the bad ones. I had a conversation with a colleague yesterday, an ABFM colleague, and about a paper topic that I was like convinced. I was like, this is a great paper idea, and he's like, and he explained why it wasn't a great paper idea. So that was a lunch. That was but as a junior faculty person, you can get bogged down in those ideas, and time is of the essence when you're a younger faculty person. So I think that certainly helped me early on. I was also, when I was a younger faculty person, I had, it sort of comes with the territory of financial management. You get drawn to different areas. There's the shiny new thing over there, and like there's the new one over there. Having some collaborators helped keep me focused on some areas, which also helps when you're going up for tenure. And I think the only other thing I would sort of add is I've had a bunch of collaborations with multiple people, and what has tended to work the best is finding people who have complementary skills to mine. So Tima put it really nicely. Like I always like to be, it always seems to be this way. I always end up being like the least intelligent person in the collaboration, and the other people really sort of teach me, and I learn from them, about methods or theory or whatever it is. And having, working with people where, they're stronger than you in theory or stronger than you in methods, it really helps you push yourself and grow in those areas. It also makes for better publications and better work products. And I know I've been focused on publications, but that's because that's immediately where I go to when I think of junior faculty. So I apologize. It's not the only collaboration, but it's where I focused for this question. So anyway, thanks, Wie.
And Aimee.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Thad. You just reminded me about something. Is one of the biggest benefits to collaboration with young scholars and with old scholars is that the young scholars know the most recent literature that I haven't been able to keep up with, because it's like a landslide. Like they just studied for exams not that long ago, and so they have much better retention. But I think also in my repeated collaborations is that you also find people that have been thinking about similar things for a long time, or I've had a couple repeated collaborations with doctoral students that went on to become new faculty members too. And I always find that the collaboration allows me to deepen my thinking about a topic as you kind of push and pull and cuss and discuss with your collaborators. And so Ed Benton published something during COVID about a kaleidoscope when we think about intergovernmental relations. And I really think that that's what collaboration does, is it offers me the kaleidoscope. So as I'm interacting with different people, I'm seeing this topic differently. It's frustrating, right? Because it's like, well, which framing are we going to use? And I think that's one of the hardest discussions, but one of the most energizing discussions too, to realize like, ooh, there's lots of different ways to think about this. Which one am I the most interested in, or can I get the most theoretical traction on to be more pragmatic? But I think it gives us this bridge into other worldviews. That's important to me, because if I can test it and circle around the kaleidoscope, then I feel more confident about my findings, right? I feel like, yeah, I can make a good argument here, and I can't make a very good argument here. So now I need to think about, well, does that matter? What can I do to supplement my argument? And so thinking about how to be robust, but still be parsimonious, because I think that's one of the big pressures, is especially when you come off of a dissertation or you come off of a really big project, is you want to publish the whole entire thing because you convinced us that this was the best statement on that little area of knowledge that was available to us at the moment of your defense. But now you got to break it down into bite-sized pieces. And so that can be really challenging too, is how to do that. And I think collaborators are able to scale us back in and help us to kind of keep it simple and to think about what's the one story that we want to tell here. Now, I have to say, one of my former collaborators gave me the best advice ever. It's called the LPU. Think about the LPU, Aimee. I'm like, the LPU, are we buying gas? Like we're going to grill? No, it's the least publishable unit. He's like, what's your audience? What's your story? Tell them that. Don't tell them 9 stories and then hope that they'll ferret it out. And so collaborators have given me lots of kind of high-level theory, how to think fast, but also low-level thinking slow about productivity and publication pipelines.
Thank you for that insights about the benefits from collaboration. I just wanted to quickly add that much of my collaboration is very multidisciplinary. So I work with engineers, geographers, political scientists, data scientists, because I'm very much a qualitative researcher. So it's always very interesting to see kind of the different perspectives that come out as you're talking about kind of very complex issues, or even looking at the same pieces of data and how you pull pieces together to tell different stories because you're coming at it from a different perspective or a different lens. So we've talked about why and how collaboration can be beneficial, but I think it's also time to let's also be real. We also know that collaborating is not easy, right? and so can you talk about some of the challenges that you face in collaborating with others on the project, and how can these challenges be overcome? And since we're still kind of playing musical chairs, Aimee gets to start.
I knew that was going to happen. All right, I have 3 takeaway points. Number 1, timing and time expectations is that we live in the world, we live in 4-month blocks, and we know that there's a certain ebb and flow to those 4-month blocks. And so you can't always control the time or the time expectations, but you can know when the conference is, and you can know a certain number of weeks or months after you submit to Journal X that they're going to have some information back to you. And so I try to think about that with my colleagues, even just something as simple as right now, I have a strange situation where their school started 2 weeks after my school. And so while I'm coming down the home stretch, they just got back from spring break and now they have a whole bunch of assignments to grade. And so that can really kind of throw a wrench in the work. And so thinking about what's optimal for my calendar, but how do I get my calendar to mesh with them? And especially if you have this has always been my strategy. As soon as you get a revise and resubmit, drop everything, stop sleeping, and get it back. Right? Because if you set it aside and you're in the middle of the semester, then it's a few months later, and then it's a few months later. I had a very unfortunate experience. It was a relatively easy revise and resubmit, but my colleague had moved away, so we couldn't work closely together, and had moved into a new position at another school. And so the colleague was going through a transition period, and that caused a big delay in terms of how quickly we responded. And by the time we got to a 12-month delay, I was freaking out because it was a big data set. I'm like, you know what's going to happen? They're going to come back with more. We want more data. We want you to update this. We want you to update that. And I just felt like, oh, we've already sunk a lot of time into this. If we would have turned it around quickly, it would have been a tier 1 publication, maybe not, but I felt like we could have got through the review process, and that would have helped my colleague in terms of being a junior faculty. And so people have lives, they move, they have families, they have family emergencies, they have elderly parents. But as much as you can, just try to stay in constant communication with them to see how things are going, and to find out, like, okay, we're going to get slowed down here. Are we willing to renegotiate our roles? And that's actually what we ended up doing in this situation before. Is I was waiting on something from my co-author, and I just said, look, I said, I think if you send me the data set, I can take care of this, and I'm happy to write it up, because that person was going to run the analysis. Like, I have a pretty good idea of what we want to do based on what you ran before. So let's do that. And so then you'd say, well, why do you split the analysis? Sometimes it's just convenience too, right? Is that some people, as Tad just mentioned, some people have different skill sets, right? And my skill set is more on the theory to practice transition than it is on running the numbers, right? Like, I can run the numbers, but it takes a lot of time. Most people will say writing takes a lot of time, but I'm like, running the numbers, it takes a tremendous amount of time. So just think about your respective skill sets, and then have a little bit of flexibility, and being able to kind of be agile and adapting as our life circumstances change. But then communicate. The squeaky wheel does get the grease. Pretty soon they'll get tired of dodging you, and they'll do it.
All right, Thad, you're next.
Sure. I won't add much, but I think Aimee hit the nail on the head with that. The best advice I ever got from a collaborator who was senior when I was just starting out was when it said it almost exactly the way that Aimee said it. So maybe you told him, I don't know. But it was the when an R&R comes in, that's what you work on, So I very quickly got disabused. I came into academia from a background in consulting, so to-do lists were my thing, and all of a sudden to-do lists were working against me. Because it's easy to put on your today I'm going to grade, do this administrative work, and do this committee work, and I don't have time to work on the R&R, so I quickly learned that prioritizing it, as Aimee said, was really the key to moving publications through the pipeline, and that has always benefited me. The only other thing that has popped up for me, and maybe Timo will have more to talk about this because it's probably more in his area. As I've had more collaborators, and they've been more across the globe, it has been more difficult to schedule check-ins. As strange as it is, collaborating with people internationally is difficult just because of time zone issues. Sometimes I will have meetings scheduled with people, 6:30 in the morning my time, which is fine because I'm up early anyway. Or super late at night when it's early for them. So I think the reality is when you are when you are developing these relationships, I think having good relationships is obviously the most important one, but I would never have listened to someone complaining about time zones before, but as I get older and older, staying awake later and later is more difficult to deal with the time zones. So just be aware of that. There is a lot you can do offline or asynchronously, but they're really for efficiency. And oftentimes I find for that last push to get either an R&R done or a first draft done, sometimes just scheduling a meeting with my colleague, my collaborators is sometimes more efficient rather than having a series back and forth. Just scheduling an hour or two where we're on a Zoom call makes all the difference in the world. And I've only collaborated with a couple of people who have been local in New York, and the rest have been distant. And so sometimes what that means is if we have conferences together, I will plan to stay an extra day at the conference, just so we can work. I've shared rooms with one of my colleagues, or actually a couple of my colleagues, and we've worked at the conference on papers while we were there. So all of this is very similar to what Aimee was already saying of people's schedules will get in the way. And one of the things to be aware of as a junior faculty especially is it's great to work with senior colleagues. They will never know the most up-to-date methods the way that you do. But as Aimee said, they will often have really great grounding in theory, hypothesis development, research questions, etc. But as you move, some senior folks will be inundated with administrative work, and it really just makes research virtually impossible for those people. And so even if they are trying to help you, wanting to be helpful, there's just so much to be done, and a lot of our departments or schools are so small that you can be inundated with administrative tasks. So there's just something to be mindful of when you're working. Don't have all your eggs in the basket with the senior folks who are doing administrative work. Make sure you have some folks who are junior or who are senior but don't have administrative work.
I see Tima nodding his head, so I'm sure he's going to elaborate more.
I think maybe the pandemic has shown us that there can be challenges, of different, sizes. But one thing to keep in mind is that we're all experiencing pressures, right, in our lives, from outside, from sometimes inside as well. So be professional and forgiving. And I want to underscore the forgiving side, because you might need the return on that favor at some point in your life. So be forgiving, I would say. Discussing and setting clear expectations is good, but also be honest with yourself in terms of how much work you have and what's doable. By how much work you can do, I really mean find the balance between work, personal life, family life, friendships, and all of those things, because I guess we're humans. We have our own lives, and succeeding in publications may not be the most important thing in life, after all. I don't want to sound preachy, there, but that's something that I tell my students. But in terms of, I think, to add to what Thad said, having a really diverse portfolio of research that you're working on is really important, so that you're not depending on one or two lines of work. It's important to actually also prioritize not only which work is important to you, but who's leading in which projects, right? And so at least sort of you put in charge someone that is going to steer the paper. And that's the type that I like in terms of collaborations, because some of my co-authors are sort of pushing, or, you know, collaborators in terms of, I guess, consulting and other things. They're pushing in one direction while I'm pushing in the other. And we can always remind each other, hey, there's this deadline coming. You got to pay attention. I need your 1 week next week, whatever is happening in your life, you know, I'm reserving it for this project. And so that's something that I think comes with, again, being honest, but also planning ahead of time and assigning these responsibilities appropriately among collaborators. Now, you know, after all, then something else to keep in mind in terms of challenges is that, unfortunately, not all work gets published or recognized, you know. And at some point, it's a good idea to leave some projects behind. And then by you know, by that I mean, I guess, the good old sunk costs calculus, you know. Is it worth to really push with a specific project, no matter how good we think it is? Unfortunately, there's some, you know, a component that is completely outside of our control, you know, in these research projects. And, you know, putting it on SSRN and moving on is not a bad idea, you know, to keep going. So
all right, thank you. So we're going to transition to the next question. It builds off a little bit of kind of the challenges, but we're thinking about what are some of the best practices that you follow when undertaking collaborative projects, and why and how have you been successful in collaborating with others? And we're going to put Thad in the hot seat to kind of get us going.
Best practices, I think Tima just hit upon what I think is the best practice, that every project needs to have a leader, someone who, even if you are doing equal work on a project, which is always desirable from a collaboration perspective, that there still has to be someone who's ultimately in charge of, even if it's that person is the person that is going to take the final product, put it into whatever bizarre bibliography format and like weird templates that the journals require, and is just going to handle the actual submission to the journal and the process of dealing with the editor and the reviewers, or, you know, making sure that the reviewer letter is formatted correctly, you know, things like that. So having someone so that it just doesn't sit there, someone who owns that leadership in each of the projects that you're working on, I think is key. I've been in projects where tasks have been fairly divided. I've been in projects where those divisions have quickly broken down. And as Aimee said, you know, I jumped in to do things that I didn't think I was going to be doing, and people jumped in to do things that I was doing, that then they took it over. So I think having some of that flexibility is fine. But I do think that the projects, I think every project I've been involved in that's had someone leading have been the successful ones. I mean, the only other thing I would add is it's harder to close out these projects than I thought going into academia. You know, as Tima wisely just put, sometimes it's worth leaving you know, a paper behind. You know, and but even if you're not going that far, you really have to understand how long it takes to do tasks. I've been the worst at this, where I think, you know, I can write the front end of a paper, you know, a theory section, you know, like I'll look at my calendar and I'll be like, oh, I have 2 days next week. I'll write the front end of that paper that I've been saying I'm going to do for a month. 2 days is not enough to write a front end of a paper, you know, regardless of what I think. So being honest with that, it's easy, you know, to have projects started, and it's just as easy to never finish them. And, you know, that's a real danger, especially, you know, before you're being evaluated for tenure.
Tima?
So I'd like to sort of maybe move what Thad said into the new practices that exist in our fields, but also in our journals. And by that, I mean, planning is something that we already all mentioned, but, recording your workflow and the technical notes of all your research projects up front in some of those depositories is gonna do a lot of good for a successful completion of the project. And so I am, I suppose, on the back end of that revolution where, unwillingly I need to participate in now these journal requirements of pre-publishing your research questions, your literature reviews, your hypotheses, pre-publishing your surveys, and what you're going to do with data sets, publishing your data sets, replication codes, and all of those things. So if planning was important 5 or 10 years ago, planning today is even more important. So all of those things in terms of just the technical aspects of workflow management is really important. And so somebody has to handle that. And what I found in terms of, I guess, successful collaborations is that there needs to be one person that is in charge of the workflow documentation and will continue doing that. Whereas we are others that have an idea, obviously, because we also want to be able to replicate the work, but also sort of a second pair of eyes of why are we doing things a certain way. So again, planning, but not just for the sake of who is doing what, but what's going in terms of the project from the beginning until the very end. When you publish and you release not only your article, but data sets, the technical notes, and the codes that come with those analysis in your research work. Now, the other aspect that I think makes successful collaborations is, I'm gonna come back to this, be professional and forgiving at any point in any collaboration, because things happen that are beyond our control for the right reasons, for the wrong reasons, but they happen. And so for us, it's important to not lose our cool over it. We're gonna see each other at ABFM next cycle, so we want to be able to do it as colleagues rather than people upset with one another. Again, you will need that favor at some point in your life. I'm telling you, as I guess as an administrator, to say the least. And so the main, I guess, takeaway from all of the things that I said right now is just have an open mind, and so be on the lookout for potential collaborators, but also know your limits in terms of what you can sign on. Yeah.
And before we let Aimee finish with that question, I do want to echo that planning. I obviously collaborate with others in publishing, but I also undertake a lot of collaborative research that is funded research. And generally in those situations, I actually build into my budget funds for a project manager to kind of keep us on track, especially when you are working with a group of 10 researchers. So that planning aspect, I think if it wasn't managed from the get-go, makes it very unwieldy at the tail end to figure out what was done, who did what, when, and all of that good stuff. So, Aimee.
Yes, and I'm sorry to hear that Tima had a similar experience to one of my former junior colleagues, that he held on to his manuscript too long. I kept telling him, like, just send it in, just get some feedback. It got published. The idea got published by another research group. Okay, well, that's good because it was a good idea. But he had planned on presenting it at a conference. And he's like, now I feel like they're going to think I'm stealing the ideas that got published. I'm like, oh, you should have just sent it in. But I think that's the good thing about collaboration, is you get this reality check. Like, when is this going to be good enough to go? Because I know as a junior faculty, I was holding on to my stuff way too long, and trying to make it perfect. And so think about the journals and the how high are the stakes. There's some journals where the stakes aren't that high and you'll probably get a shot at a revision. There's other ones where if it's a really small group, people will know what you wrote. They might have seen it at a conference, so they know that maybe it's formative and they can give you suggestions, but they also might just wonder what you're doing and point that out in their criticisms, right? But there's always a grain of truth in there. I do also want to say that, yes, ABFM is a small conference. It's our family. Like, we get together for our once a year professional family vacation. And so that is great, you know, and so reach out to them too, is that they might have some ideas, especially if you're stuck with something. My most important thing, and I can't believe that I typed this in the very first thing when I saw your questions, I said, try to say no 1 or 2 times. At my very first job, that's what my colleague said, is write a Post-it note. And when somebody asks you anything, just look at it and say, is this something I already plan to do? And if it's not, just say no the first time. If they come back and you're feeling better about it, you can say no the second time, you know, but at least it gives you a chance to be more thoughtful. You're just putting them off a little bit so that you can make a rational choice, because there's lots and lots of opportunities all the time. You know, that's why we got into this profession, because we were always asking why, and we always wanted to go and find out. And so there's no shortfall of things that you can do, people that you can collaborate with. It's one of the greatest things about our job is we can talk to anybody all around the world. It doesn't even have to be the person in the desk in the room right next door to us. I think that I try to be really thoughtful when I'm working with students. And I've learned over the years, especially since I deal with a lot of undergraduate students on my research projects, is that I need to meet with them real time, whether it's face-to-face or Zoom, on a regular schedule, just to make sure that they're doing what I told them to do. But also, oftentimes they think they know what they're going to be doing. And then during the week, they're like, I didn't understand my notes. Like, what was I supposed to be doing? So just having that check-in so you don't get completely stalled. And I think you have to, again, it's the semester flow. It's like, don't make things due at Thanksgiving or spring break, because they're not going to do it. Let's be truthful. And same thing for the last 2 weeks too, is that they might do something for you, but I don't trust it, because they did it really quickly while they were writing assignments and getting ready for exams and everything else. But in return, I'm very generous about ownership, is that I have enough publications. And so I tell them, like, if you work with me on my project, I will make sure that you're listed as an author. I will try to get you to a conference. I will use this to write a letter of recommendation for you to do whatever the next thing is that you want to do. And so I think that kind of softens some of the blows when I'm like, we're going to meet every week for an hour, and I need to have you send me stuff one day ahead so I can review it. I think they feel like I don't trust them, which is part of it, but really I just don't have time. Like, I need to know what they've done before the meeting so I can figure out what we're going to talk about at the meeting, and then what's realistic that I can ask them to do in the next week or the next amount of time before we meet again. And so I think that has helped a lot with my collaborative projects. It's much more complicated when you're collaborating with a peer, because you can't have that kind of accountability. But I completely agree that doing it in real time matters. You know, if you can just somehow get them to commit that we're going to talk, or we're going to meet at this conference, or we're going to stay an extra day, or, as everyone knows, Carol and I always share a room, so we always are collaborating at conferences. That's already understood, is that as soon as the conference is ended and we're going to go do something fun, most of the time all we'll be talking about is whatever research project we're working on. So that's the things that I've learned along the way there.
I wanted to echo one of Aimee's comments about saying no. And I know it sounds a lot easier than it is to do. And so one of the things that I learned very early on is, rather than saying no immediately, because I have a lot of trouble saying no to people, that rather I would say, let me think about it and I'll email you. It's a lot easier for me to email somebody no than saying no to their face. And I had to learn that about myself. And so I learned very quickly to say, let me think about it. I'll email you to let you know my decision. So sometimes you just have to learn what works well for you. So we are kind of at the tail end. What other advice or insights would you offer to doctoral students or junior faculty. And Aimee, I'll let you lead us off.
I think that my advice is to think about this notion of productivity is that what are your goals in the short term that you must accomplish, and then tailor your projects according to that. If you're going up for third year review and it's all about publications, don't take on any new projects, right? Just push everything out. On the other hand is that if you just got tenure, then that would be a great time to think about a new project and a good time to think about collaborating with somebody that's a little bit more distant but adjacent to what you want to do, because I agree with what we said is the world that we live in right now is very interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary, and that's all the universities are doing is they're trying to incentivize funded research that involves multiple teams from different disciplines. And so that's after tenure, that seems like that to me, that would be the best time to take on things like that.
Well, I think I have maybe 3 points to summarize in terms of what else to recommend. One is focus on items that you can control. And sort of, I think that's an exercise where one needs to sit down and say, what are the things that I can do on my own and push? And what are the other things that I depend on some other people, and then maybe email them, or, not lose sleep, at least over those things. Stressing doesn't help, but sort of this knowing where you can control things, I think is really, really important. The other thing is put things on your calendar and make sure people see your calendar, and, they don't try to put things on it. Because whatever the requirements of your jobs are in terms of how they measure success, those things need attention and time. The other thing is something that, a senior colleague told me once was, go and meet, network, see how people do it, maybe download a couple of CVs of people that, you would like to become when you grow up, kind of advice, And that helps in terms of at least understanding what the objective or, what the targets are, where you need to be in 3 to 5 years down the road. And so I guess the saying goes as fake it until you make it, and so, but, I guess fake is a too strong word. Mimicry is probably socialization into the discipline is a better word. Finally, what I like to say is enjoy friendships, and, don't forget that, our professions are a part of life, but not life in itself. And so I think that puts perspective. It helps to actually find collaborators that have hobbies as well, in addition to their theoretical and statistical skills that they might have. Sitting down and working on a project with a person that likes the same type of lasagna that you do probably is a better sort of practice to get things done. So with that, I'm gonna finish here.
Thad?
I have nothing else to add after the wisdom of my two colleagues who summarized it brilliantly. I will simply say that as a doctoral student, or as a PhD, or as a newly minted PhD in a faculty position, I would say it's probably, it's not impossible, but it would be very difficult to get through to tenure without collaboration. So don't view this as a will I or won't I. It's you really do need to do it, but how you do it and how you spend your time is really critical at that stage of your career. And simply, don't free ride, don't allow free riding. But if you follow some of the advice that Tima and Aimee, just articulated, especially of working with people who, you like, you should never be working with people you don't like, because you're going to be spending time with them, and life is short, and working with unpleasant people is very unpleasant. It's so, you know, make sure that you choose wisely. Saying no is difficult. But if it doesn't work for you, it's better to say no than to be miserable in a project. And don't view the project as, oh, I'll just do this project and get through it. As I said earlier, projects drag on longer than you think. You will be miserable longer than you think. And so if you go in only collaborating or trying to collaborate mostly with people who you know, provide grace, provide forgiveness, provide you with something other than just work, you know, output, you know, you'll feel better, you'll be more productive. And I don't think I don't think that's to be overlooked at all. So I will just leave it at that.
And Aimee, if you want to wrap us up.
Well, I want to wrap it up by thanking you. And I was very excited when I saw who my guest panelists would be. And I've been sitting here looking at the people on the screen and thinking about people that I've collaborated with and people I'm hoping to collaborate with in the future. And it just thinks like, this is a fabulous job. You know, they pay us to do this. And we put in as many hours as we do for that pay. Well, there's always a balance, right?
So I would like to thank our panelists for your contributions, and thank you to our audience members for joining us today. We are at that time of the year where we are trying to wrap up the semester, so I appreciate your attendance, and I appreciate all of you for joining us today. Thank you so much.